Alright guys, we are back in the car for another video, and today we are going to be talking about the Kelford Cams. I know this is a long overdue video, and I do apologize that it's taken me so long to get here, but it has been a journey to say the least. I've gone through a lot of trial and error, you know, fixing things, dialing things back, turning it back up, trying to make sure that I get the setup exactly where I want it, and I truly have a good understanding of what I can expect with the Kelford Cams on my car. So with all of that in mind, I've had the cams for several months now, and I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a review, share my thoughts on the installation, you know, the capabilities on my car, dyno numbers, we've got Dragy numbers, and I'll be able to provide all of that. So hopefully you guys can, you know, use my recommendations to plan out your build if you're considering going the same route. So we'll talk about all of that in this video, and hopefully you guys find it useful. Now, as always, for everybody that's new to the channel, I create these videos to help keep you updated on the latest developments in our community, as well as discuss technical topics so that we have a better understanding of how our engines work. So if you're interested in more videos like that, be sure to subscribe because there will be a lot more coming out in the future. So to start off with the really basic stuff, you know, again, cams are just a great way to improve the performance of your engine. The stock cams are allowing airflow into your engine, but at the end of the day, your engine is just a big air pump. So the more air you can let in and out, the more power you'll be able to make, and that's where these upgraded cams come into play. So there are lobes on the cams that actually open and close your valves, and if you make those lobes taller, you're going to open the valves more, which can let more air in, or if you make the lobes wider, then it can keep the valves open for longer, which also lets more air in. And so Kelford took a look at the BMW design. Unfortunately, our cylinder heads are extremely complex with the Valvetronic system, so there are multiple cams, multiple angles and loads and things that you have to consider when you're upgrading a camshaft. But they took all of that into account and generated 3 different versions that we can add to our builds. Now, the first version is the Stage 1 cam, and this is rated for 550 to 750 horsepower. It's just a light entry-level cam to help get things going, and it works great for like stock turbo or hybrid turbo setups. Then there are the Stage 2 cams, and these are rated for 750 to 1,000 horsepower. So those are more higher horsepower builds, full frame turbo setups, people with built trans, probably built engines as well, but still something that can be like kind of daily driven and has good street manners. And then you have the Stage 3 cams, and these are rated for up to 1,400 plus horsepower. Kind of the sky's the limit as more people make more power with them. I'm sure that spec will be updated, but basically those are for like the race cars. So all the fastest Supras and B58 cars tend to go for the Stage 3 cams. Now on my car, I just have the Stage 1 cams, and the reason I went that route is because I have a stock turbo. So even at the limit, it's barely going to be hitting like the low 500s, and so I wasn't really sure if a Stage 2 or Stage 3 cam. Interesting. I guess you can set the alarm with the keys in your pocket. Good to know. But yeah, the Stage 1 cams are rated for, you know, more mild builds, and since the stock turbo runs out of steam really quickly, I figured that it would be great pair with my stock turbo setup. Now I have upgraded everything else. So I have an upgraded intake from Race Ready Performance, I have a VRSF downpipe, I have a titanium charge pipe, BimmerNetwork intake manifold with port injection. The car is currently tuned on full E85 using Motive Reflex, and you know, everything with the Stage 1 cams, just a stock turbo setup. So yes, it is set up to make more power with a big turbo. I basically have all the other supporting mods, but for now I just wanted to test it at the stock turbo setup to see what the limits were. Now, as you guys saw, when I installed these cams, I ran into issues almost immediately. It took me a long time to get the cams installed because, especially the valve springs, they're just a big headache. I don't know how else to explain it other than they're annoying to deal with, and those little retainers that hold the valve springs in place, they're just really annoying. So I'm not really interested in doing that again anytime soon, but you know, it's a part of the process. You have to run the springs with the more aggressive cams to make sure that you don't run into valve float issues. So I installed everything on the car, brought it to the dyno to start getting it tuned. I had everything set up with OdinTuned on a base map, and then we started having a huge oil leak on the bottom of the dyno floor. Now, I didn't think it was related to my install. I thought that maybe there was just some excess oil coming off of the valve cover and kind of like seeping onto the floor. But by the time I got to the dyno, it was like a big pool of fluid. And so at that point I knew, ooh, I love these roundabouts. But by that time I knew like something was wrong. So we brought the car back, and this is what I saw. It looked like oil was leaking from the chain tensioner, which I thought maybe when I reinstalled the chain tensioner after doing the cams, I damaged something, the gasket wore out. You know, I didn't replace the gasket, of course, so I was like, duh, maybe I just need to replace it. But even at that point, I was still seeing that oil leak. And then I got a tip from Juan over at Big Boost, who ran into a similar issue and found out that it was rated to the Vanos actuator. So this is a little tip for anybody that runs into this issue. If you have an oil leak or anything, check your actuator. There is a gasket around it, and if that gasket is leaking, it leaks down the back of the cylinder head and comes around and drips just under the tensioner and looks exactly like the tensioner is leaking, but it's not the tensioner. Now, in my case, thankfully, the gasket wasn't bad. I just simply forgot to install it, and when I went back and looked at it again, I realized that the gasket was just sitting on my transmission tunnel, waiting patient for me to pick it back up and put it where it goes. So again, shout out to Juan for the tip. I'm really thankful that I was able to find it and get everything fixed so that I fixed that oil leak. Now I got it back on the dyno. We started doing pulls, and it started breaking up really bad. You guys saw that in my last video, and that was related to setting the timing properly. So again, I lost more time. I took everything back apart, reinstalled it twice until I figured out where the issue was and what was creating slack on the chain and preventing me from getting it in time properly. So at that point, I was finally able to get the car dialed in. Now, like I said, at this point, I had done all of my tuning with OdinTuned, but with all the different revisions and issues I was constantly running into, and he has a lot of other customers as well. He's got a day job that he's got to make sure he can, you know, commit time to. So at this point, he was running out of time. He was getting really bogged down with all of his other work. So I ended up working with a different tuner, and I started working with Doug Newton over at Sutphin Tuning. And a big shout out to him. If you guys haven't heard of him, definitely check out all of his social media channels. I'll have it linked down in the description, but he tunes on multiple different platforms. He tunes B58s, S58s, S55s, basically anything you would want, he can set you up. So I highly recommend reaching out to him if you guys are interested in tuning your B58. So at that point, we restarted the clock, started getting everything dialed in for flex fuel again, and got it all tuned on E85. And here's how the dyno went. So finally we got on the dyno and we did 3 pulls, and you can see how much power the car made. I was satisfied with the results, but it's not much more than you would probably see on a typical stock turbo setup. I made around 480 wheel horsepower on my 440i, and you can see here it made similar power as well. There was one run that made 500, but when you look at the chart, you can see it's actually reading a blip at the end where the car shifted and it kind of spiked at the end, so it read that as the max horsepower. But if you look at the curves, they're all very consistent and pretty much overlined on each other. So I would rate it for 480 wheel horsepower, 530 foot-pounds of torque. That is more torque than I saw on my 440i. That one was around 500, so this was closer to 530. But yeah, the actual peak horsepower was about the same. Then I also got some Dragy numbers done, and the Dragy did great. Of course, the DA was negative for the first time in ever, so I was really excited to see how the car would perform. And it ran an 8.7 60 to 130. So again, I was really satisfied with those results. Not a record-breaking run at all, but you know, full weight 340i, no crazy tricks or anything, just flooring it and shifting at 6,000 RPM like the good Lord intended. So yeah, those are kind of the results. Now let's kind of share my final thoughts on this. So first of all, no, I don't think that the Kelford Cams are worth it on a stock turbo setup. For the cost and how much it takes to install it, I think most people will not see the gains that they would spending that money on a bigger turbo setup. There are a lot of cheaper options that you can go with to upgrade your turbo and just take advantage of the stock turbo, especially on a Gen 1. I think on a Gen 2, it might be a little bit more beneficial, but Mike Body recently posted some of his results with his M340i, and he shared that he didn't feel like the Kelford Cams made a big difference either. So him and I are kind of in the same boat. We've got everything done to our cars, except, you know, I don't have like an upgraded transmission and stuff, but it's kind of set up for a big turbo setup. He was just pushing the stock turbo to see how far he could go, and at that point the cams didn't really seem like they were going to make a huge difference or give you a big benefit. But one thing I did see an improvement on was torque, which I think helped aid with my 60 to 130 times being faster. Getting that extra torque helped push me into the 8s. I had been in the 9s all summer, and so this was the first time I've seen 8s. Granted, again, you know, the DA was negative, much better conditions now that it's wintertime, but I think the cams do help provide an improvement in acceleration, like that immediate response. And even Doug said that when we were tuning the car, it seemed to run more efficiently, and it was making the same boost at a much lower wastegate duty cycle. So it works, the airflow is there, it just doesn't really make a lot more power when the turbo's out of steam. Also, a lot of people ask me if this will work on an off-the-shelf map, and I would not personally recommend it. Since I had so much trouble with the cams, you know, dialing things in and trying to get it installed properly, I had some time driving it on an off-the-shelf map as well as my base map, and I started getting lean codes. And what it seemed like is, especially down low, the car was seeing extra airflow that wasn't accounted for in the tune, and the fueling was struggling to keep up. It just was too far and too different from what the base map was set up for. And so especially like the initial tip in where boost started coming in, you could see the car lean out a little bit before fueling caught up. So I would not recommend running this with an off-the-shelf tune. Even if you have a tune set up, I know some people dyno back to back with the cams and just see how much power it makes without changing any tune settings, but that's definitely not something I would recommend. Definitely not something I would drive on like beating on the car all the time. I would at least try to make sure you have a tune with a little bit of extra fueling added in to compensate for the additional airflow you're going to see. Now beyond that, for everybody that's doing things the right way, if you've already got a big turbo setup and you're just trying to figure out if you should upgrade your cams, I highly recommend it. The only caveat and things you guys should be aware of is if you are going to be upgrading your cams and you're going to be trying to make more power, you very easily can overwhelm something else in your system. And again, this is kind of just the curse of the B58. It's so easy to make power that people forget there are a lot of things that can break on our cars. And if you're not careful, you're going to easily overwhelm the system and run into a problem where you're making more power than your transmission can handle or your engine can handle or, you know, your fueling can keep up with. And then it doesn't really make a difference that you're putting on parts that technically can make more power. You know, are you really building your entire setup around these goals, or are you just slapping more parts on your car that are gonna cause something to break? That's something that you're going to have to be real with yourself on. You know, if you've already got a maxed out setup that's maxing out your transmission, it doesn't make sense to add cams if you're not going to use it to make more power. And that's the reason why I didn't put the cams on my 440i. Everybody asked me why I didn't do that. Wouldn't that make more sense since it has a big turbo setup and stuff? But I'm already at the limits of my clutch on that car, so I can't take advantage of the cams anyway. So yeah, those are the thoughts that you need to consider when you're planning out your build. But if you've already got an upgraded trans, you've already got, you know, supporting mods to support the extra power, highly recommend it. You'll get quicker spool, more power with the same amount of boost. You know, the car is just not going to be working as hard to make the same power, and that's kind of a win-win all around. I think anybody can take advantage of it if you have the supporting mods that will make it a safe setup. So yeah, hopefully that didn't seem like I was rambling for too long, you know, just putting a lot of time in with the cams. I think it's a really great product. I think the main decision between most people is whether they want stage 2 or stage 3, you know, because if you're already running a big turbo setup with supporting mods that can take advantage of it, you're hopefully already making more than 750 horsepower. So go with the stage 2 setup if it's, you know, a daily driven or mixed use car. Go with the stage 3 cams if you plan on really sending it and turning it into a race car, and just enjoy all the additional benefits and efficiencies that come with a setup dialed in. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this video. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope this helps. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below.